All right, Dr. Carrie Johansson, welcome to the Compassion Speak podcast. I'm Cleo Buchanan. I'm an angel channeler. This is my beloved angel partner, Sean Allison, who is an intuitive healer and chaplain. Dr. Carrie, welcome.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be here.
So we're so excited to talk about this. I think boundaries are a topic that we've talked about before on the Compassion Speak podcast, but it never gets old. It's like one of those topics that we always need a sort of a fresh view on. So I loved how your own description of this, inviting instead of demanding. Can you talk about that?
So a while back, I was watching a TikTok and I saw someone say, I set a boundary. I told them they couldn't do that. Right. I feel like I'd had clients coming in saying things in similar fashions. I'd had some family members who tried out that approach. And I think that they miss the mark. Boundaries are actually invitations into different levels of connection and intimacy in our lives. They aren't something that you wait all the way until the end and then shove people out. And so when you have good boundaries, people are clear and they understand they're really what you say yes to, not just what you say no to. And I came up with a metaphor that I call the boundary castle. So if you imagine that we are each sovereign beings, there are 3 sovereign beings right now on this recording. And each one of us has our own castle. And the question with boundaries is, who's allowed on the grounds of the castle? Who gets to come into the courtyard? If you're having a party, who do you invite inside your home for dinner? Who is close enough to you that metaphorically they would be on the 2nd floor in your guest room? And then who is actually allowed in your bedroom, in the inner sanctum? And I sort of always tell the joke, in your inner sanctum, it should be you and maybe your spouse and maybe your kids and occasionally your dog. But it definitely shouldn't be your accountant. It's not that kind of party. Right? So I think when we are thinking about boundaries in this way, then you can really sort of take a bit of an accounting of who's in your life and who do you want to be closer to and have them be closer in, and who gets a different level of information and connection with you, and setting that stage early instead of having everyone be crowded in your bedroom, at which point you have to get explosive and order everyone out.
I saw a fabulous Facebook post about exactly this, and they said something that I thought was very beautiful. Many times on Facebook, there's people who insist that is what boundaries are, the explosive moment, right?
Yes.
Well, you reach a point in your life where you decide to kick everyone out, and this is important, and it's like, oh, yeah, so painful. And so I saw someone who made a very beautiful post addressing that, and they said, boundaries do not have to be an electric fence.
Yes.
I thought that was great. Touch it and
it shouldn't be a surprise electric fence. I think the problem with those explosive shoves out is oftentimes, I mean, occasionally somebody's being ridiculous and they need a firm reminder, but most of the time when folks get to that shove out stage, the person on the receiving end of the shove or the shock has no idea it's coming. It's like an invisible electric fence where they're fine. And suddenly they're like, zing, right? And so if you're more clear from the beginning about what works for you and what doesn't, what lines will you cross and what won't you cross, it gives you so much more power in the relationship to be kind.
Mm-hmm. This is beautiful. The idea of them being positive. Talk to me for a minute about what it looks like when boundaries are not functioning. We've described one kind, the electric fence.
Right.
Okay. So what Are there many kinds of boundary dysfunction?
You know, I think that there's several kind of famous kinds of boundary dysfunction, and they tend to be divided into two camps: boundaries that are too rigid and boundaries that are too loose. And the interesting thing about boundaries that are too rigid is people don't have enough room to just exist or function, right? And boundaries that are too loose are actually really unclear, and they leave people feeling very uncertain. And so, a big piece of what you can do in setting boundaries is to be clear and then also be able to have a little bit of flexibility, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'm trying to think of a good example. When my daughter was little, there were folks who she would literally use like a jungle gym, right? She was like, they were her favorite people. I'm thinking of like her uncle. And, I mean, she could just climb on them. One of my best guy friends, she'd climb on them. It was incredibly safe. It felt really great to everybody. And she felt well loved. But if she was climbing on the checker at the grocery store, that would have been wildly inappropriate.
Mhm.
Right. And so this is kind of a silly example, but in our lives, we're often either, limiting so much, or we're letting so much go. And the answer is in that happy medium. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yes, totally. I love that. Can you talk about boundaries maybe that are constantly changing or are
Sure.
back and forth, back and forth, back and forth?
Yeah.
Inconsistent, I guess.
Inconsistent boundaries leaves people feeling really confused. And then they don't know how to behave. And then they end up feeling very stung and kind of surprised when you get angry with them. And so you want to be kind of clear about what works for you and what doesn't. And again, boundaries are an invitation in, not a shove out. And what that looks like is that they are actually about yourself. They aren't about controlling someone else. So if you think about, gosh, what's a good example? If you think about someone, let's say you have a needy friend who calls and kind of calls incessantly and always wants you to solve a problem. If you're setting a boundary by saying, you can't call me anymore, that's you trying to control the other person. Or if you're setting a boundary by saying, you call me too much, I don't like it, that's criticizing the other person. And control and criticism are not actually boundaries. A boundary sounds like, with a person like that, here's when I'm available this week to talk. I'm afraid I'm not available right now. Right? So you're talking about yourself, and then the other person can do with that information what they will, but it's not actually your job to control them. Occasionally, it's important to control access to yourself, right? Like if we use that castle metaphor, we probably do have doors that shut, right? And occasionally there will be a door that you've decided needs to be shut on someone whose behavior just isn't tolerable to you anymore. But it isn't necessary to deliver it by telling them what a terrible person they are. It's really just saying what does and doesn't work for you.
Wow, I love that. That is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. The idea of inviting people to do what we want instead of constantly criticizing or stomping or drawing the line, building the fence, making sure that they're on the other side, right? Oh my gosh, this is amazing. So, talk some about, I think we had some questions about like, do you teach your clients or even your friends what good boundaries look like? If they're doing this with you, how are you representing what good boundaries look like for your clients and for maybe even for a client who you might be struggling with?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's several boundaries that I set in my office. And again, without a lot of judgment or fanfare, but it's things like, if you come late, we still end on time.
Hmm.
If I start us late, I will push time. I used to work with teenagers who need a little bit more freedom and flexibility sometimes with their languaging. And I would say, you are welcome to swear in here. You may not swear at me.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. Right. But being really clear gave them the freedom to then not be worried and also to understand when they'd crossed a line.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two sort of examples. Are there
Those
others?
are excellent examples. I love that. That is so powerful. I think teenagers are the perfect example of where it seems we feel so trapped or cornered, and that the boundary issue just gets pushed and pushed and pushed. And the kids know exactly where all our triggers are, so they know exactly how to hook us and make us misbehave.
Yep.
And then it's our fault and not their fault, and things like that. My son's 11, but I tell you what, he's 11 going on 17, or maybe maybe older than that. But yeah, there's definite dynamics here where I think being able to come up with positive boundaries just can change that whole situation. I know
Yeah.
lots of parenting books right now are very much about the consequences thing, right? You
Right.
don't ever have to tell them what to do, because you tell them what to do and you tell them what the consequences are if they don't do
Right.
it.
Right.
Right. So with my son, he finds that punitive, and he gets really offended if I say, well,
It feels like a threat, right? Hanging over his head.
right. I mean, we always start at the top. We always start at the top and then go down. Hey, if you do that, you'll be ready for something else. Hey,
Right.
if this happens, everything's going to go smoother. Hey, this is a really good idea. Let's get this done. If you do that, there'll be 15 minutes of YouTube. Okay, we're down to um, I'm going to have to count. And if you aren't doing this by the time the count is done, then there will be no YouTube all day.
Right.
And if I don't say that before actually counting, he is on fire. He is
Because it
so
feels
offended.
unfair, right?
It feels unfair. But if I just tell him that that's the next move,
Yep.
that's all it takes for him to go, "Oh,
Oh,
yeah, I don't want to go there."
yep. Yep. And that's such a beautiful thing, because you're essentially giving him choice. Because at the end of the day, he can choose to blow through the boundary, and then there are logical consequences associated with blowing through a boundary. We had a friend who was frequently late, right? And by frequently late, I mean not like a 5-minute late person. Like, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 45 minutes. And we were leaving for an important event, and the event was starting at a certain time. And so we had said, here is when the car is departing from our driveway. Here is our ideal takeoff time. Worst case, we'll be running, like it will be between this time and this time. Worst case, this is the do or die kind of time. She arrived 20 minutes late. She missed the event. She was really mad. And we were like, we were really clear. We told you when the car would be leaving the driveway. Well, you didn't wait for me. No, the event is starting at this time. Regardless of what time you came, this was our hard stop, which meant that we were leaving here. And it was interesting, because at the end of the day, for a second, she was really angry at us for not waiting. And then she realized we had been clear, right? So the same with your son. If he chooses to blow through something, that's fine. That's his prerogative. But you were really clear about what would happen next if he did.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting sort of what happens to our boundaries when we add, because this is what I this is what I work with all day, is trauma, right?
Right.
What happens all this description is very clean and lovely, and all of us are mature human beings. What happens when, um, for example, the friend who you have drawn a line with goes ballistic and
Yep.
goes Pompeii because there is something way more than being late or your friendship. There's a whole story behind this.
Yep. Being late got turned into a story about being abandoned.
Right.
And on our end, we actually said that we just weren't going to participate in that story because it wasn't true. And it was real that she missed the boundary. So our job then was to essentially continue to say, we love you, and we mean what we say when we say it. So that both and thinking is something that I love to bring in. This is true and this is true. Both things are actually true. And accounting for both is important.
So that is beautiful. That's very clear. I love that. Being able to offer someone that it doesn't change how we feel about you,
Yep.
that we still care.
Yeah.
No matter what consequences have come down. So I'm very interested, what happens when we're trying to uphold our boundaries and our triggers start coming into play?
Well, I think that's where it's super important to be aware of your own reactions, right? And this is one of the things that I say a lot is I teach this stuff all the time, and I can still have a hostile takeover of my emotions or my reactions. And my job is to notice that that's happening, not just to get angry at someone else, right? My job is to be like, oh, I'm triggered. And it's not, I'm triggered because you. It's like, I'm triggered. And what would I like to do about that trigger? Because the only person I can control is me. So if my answer to my trigger is I want them to stop behaving that way, we're going to be in this loop for a while, right? Because I don't have agency. I'm not their sovereign being. I'm my own sovereign being. So it's a piece of why I bring in that metaphor of the boundary castle is if I'm queen of my castle, then I'm the one who's in charge of what happens in the castle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can't blame other people. If I've let someone in and let them cross my boundaries, I can't actually be angry at them if I haven't communicated what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay. This is interesting. I think one of the most interesting things is all the different ways that when we're triggered that we could become blind.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Right. So sometimes we can't even tell
Yep.
that we're in somebody else's stuff.
Mhm.
Me and my son, perfect example. You know, when is it the mom's business how much they ate today? When is it his business how much he ate and drank? And then
Yeah.
at 6 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, he's like, Mom, I have a terrible headache. I feel sick. I have to go to bed. I can't go to school tomorrow. Why? I didn't drink any water all day.
Right.
I'm going to vomit. I'm now seriously ill
Literally made
because I
myself.
have not,
Yeah.
you know?
So I think this is a great place to ask a question. We can't obviously do this necessarily with like the person that we meet on the street who's taking care of themselves poorly. But with our loved ones, we can certainly say, hey, I've noticed this pattern. I'm not enjoying this pattern. Are you enjoying this pattern? Because then if you and he can be on the same side against the pattern, then all of a sudden you guys are aligned and you can collaborate against the pattern. If the two of you are arguing back and forth like this, and that is the pattern, then we know that it's not probably going to go very well. But this is a great question. When does your sovereignty and someone else's sovereignty, when they collide, what are you supposed to do about it? And typically, particularly with our loved ones, it's about taking a step back. And it's also about saying out loud, I'm not interested in controlling you, but you are not taking care of yourself. How do we make sense of that problem? And so you're labeling the problem instead of poking at the person, right? And so oftentimes you can get more buy-in and engagement from someone else if you are inviting them to stand on the sidelines of something and look at the pattern instead of poking at them because the pattern is happening.
I love that. I wonder if that also helps us to sort of get out of our trigger. If we're in that frantic, oh my God,
I have to make him eat.
I have to make him eat. I'm a bad mother. I've done something terrible. This is a disaster. Here we go again. How can I possibly get him to recognize that this is an issue? Where is the learning happening here? All the triggers going on for me, stepping out and saying, it's us against this pattern.
Well, and here's where I love what I call the assertiveness formula. So it goes a little something like this. I'm feeling because of, and I wish.
Okay.
So I'm starting to feel panicked that you haven't eaten today. I'm feeling because of. And I wish that we could figure out you just eating something without me having to nag you into doing it. I'm feeling because of, and I wish. And oftentimes the assertiveness formula actually can be considered a setting of boundaries, because the assertiveness is saying the line that you will and won't cross. Right?
I love this. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to use this every day with everybody I know.
And I wish. Yeah.
That is great. I'm feeling blank because of blank, and I wish. And what I'm seeing is, I have this incredible gift to take something really brilliant and really use it the wrong way. And so what I'm seeing is the immediate temptation to say, I'm feeling bad because of you.
Right.
I wish you'd stop it.
So notice it's very tempting. Like, if only you didn't do this, I would feel more comfortable, right? That's not actually the assertiveness formula. That's bossy boots coming forward, right? So the assertiveness formula typically doesn't have a pointy finger you in it. It's more a factual observation of something that's going on, and it's identifying your feelings.
Okay, this is good. Right.
And it's not, you're making me so angry and I wish you would stop. Right? Because that's not actually, that's not describing your feelings. I'm feeling upset and worked out and worked up because we're in this fight again about eating. Can we please get out of this fight about eating? And maybe how you do that is literally you just set a cell phone alarm, or you both go to the grocery store together, right? Like, there's ways to problem solve this that can make both of you feel good. And then there don't have to be any pointy fingers involved.
I love this. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. Because Sean has disappeared, I'm going to wrap it up. But this has been fantastic. Dr. Carrie Johansson, thank you so much for joining us on Compassion Speak. I so appreciate it. This is fabulous information. I'm so looking forward to hearing the conversation that we're going to have on Facebook from many clients talking about their experiences and their techniques for how they deal with different things, how they decide to make boundaries sticky instead of repellent, and things like that. So thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward. I hope we get to do this again. Thank you so much.
That sounds fantastic. Thanks, Cleo. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.